I, 72, lost my wife, Eleanor, 8 months ago. The silence in the house is a physical thing, a weight on my shoulders. We were married for 49 years. Every corner of this house holds a memory of her. Her reading glasses are still on the nightstand. Her favorite gardening gloves are still by the back door, caked with dry mud. I have not had the heart to move them. My son, Mark, and his wife, Karen, visit every Sunday. They say they are checking on me. I know they mean well, but their visits often feel more like inspections. Karen, especially, walks through the rooms with a critical eye. She talks about decluttering and modernizing. She uses words like fresh start and moving on. I know she thinks she is helping, but each suggestion feels like an attempt to erase Eleanor. Last week, she rearranged the living room furniture while I was taking a nap. She said it created a better flow. All it did was make me feel like a stranger in my own home. I moved it all back the next day. She did not mention it on her next visit, but I saw the tight set of her jaw. The battle for this house, for my memories, was a quiet one, fought with misplaced photo albums and donated throw pillows. But I was losing. I was tired of fighting. I just wanted to keep the peace for Mark's sake. He always looked so stressed, caught between his wife and his father. So I let some things go. The curtains Eleanor made were replaced. The old, comfortable armchair she loved was sent to a charity shop. Each concession felt like a small betrayal. There was one thing, however, that I could not let go of. It was Eleanor's recipe box. It was a simple wooden box, dark cherry wood, that I had made for her on our 5th anniversary. Inside, it held decades of her life. Her mother's recipe for apple pie, written on a faded index card. Her own award-winning chili recipe, with notes and adjustments scribbled in the margins. Recipes from friends, neighbors, and newspaper clippings, all stained with flour, butter, and thyme. It was not just a collection of recipes. It was a history of our family, of every birthday, holiday, and celebration we ever had. I wanted it. I needed to have it near me. So last Sunday, when Mark and Karen were over, I decided to ask for it. They had helped me clear out the kitchen pantry a few months back, a day Karen had orchestrated with ruthless efficiency. I remembered seeing her place the box into a larger container marked storage. I assumed it was in their garage. I waited for a pause in the conversation, my heart beating a little faster than usual. It felt like a big request, asking for a piece of my own life back. Karen, I started, trying to keep my voice casual. I was thinking about Eleanor's chocolate chip cookies the other day. I would love to have her old recipe box back if you still have it in storage. Karen looked up from her phone. She did not smile. Her expression was flat, unreadable. The wooden box, she asked. Yes, that's the one, I said a little too eagerly. The one I made for her. She exchanged a quick glance with Mark. He looked down at his lap, refusing to meet my eyes. That was a bad sign. Mark's avoidance was always a prelude to bad news delivered by Karen. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Something was wrong. Oh, Karen said, her voice smooth and practiced. We donated it. The words hung in the air. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. You what? I asked. We donated it, she repeated, this time with a hint of impatience, as if I were slow to understand. It was just old paper. It was taking up space. We took a whole carload of things to Goodwill. It was for the best, to clear out all that clutter. I could not speak. The room felt suddenly cold. Clutter. She called Eleanor's life, her legacy, clutter. I looked at Mark, pleading with my eyes for him to say something, to fix this. To say it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. He just shrugged, a small, helpless gesture. Karen thought it was for the best, Dad, he mumbled. To help you move forward. Move forward. I was so tired of that phrase. It felt like they wanted me to sprint away from my own past, to jettison 49 years of love, like it was excess baggage. The recipe box was not baggage. It was my anchor, and she had thrown it away. A cold, hard anger began to form where the shock had been. I knew in that moment that this was a line she had crossed. This was not about curtains or chairs anymore. This was a declaration of war. I would not let her erase my wife. I just looked at her, my face a blank mask, and nodded slowly. I had to think. I had to figure out what to do. The peace I had been trying so hard to keep was no longer worth the price. The days after that conversation were a blur of quiet fury. I went through the motions of my life. I made my coffee. I read the newspaper. I walked down to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. But my mind was elsewhere. It was replaying Karen's words over and over. It was just old paper, clutter. Each time I heard her voice in my head, the anger solidified a little more, turning from a hot, messy emotion into something cold and sharp. I had to get that box back. Not just for me, but for Eleanor. I spent hours on the phone. I called every Goodwill and charity shop within a 50-mile radius. I described the dark cherry wood box in painstaking detail. I described the small, carved heart on the lid. I described the slightly loose hinge on the left side. No one had seen it. Every call ended the same way, with a polite but firm "Sorry, sir. We do not have anything like that." With each failed attempt, a new, darker thought started to creep in. What if she had not donated it? What if she had just thrown it in the trash? The thought made me physically ill. To think of those precious, handwritten cards, soaked with coffee grounds and garbage juice, was unbearable. But another part of me, a small, stubborn part, refused to believe that. Karen was many things. She was controlling, insensitive, and had a startling lack of sentimentality. But she was not wasteful. She was the kind of person who would sell a used tea bag if she thought she could get a nickel for it. Throwing away a beautiful, handmade wooden box seemed out of character. It was the lie that bothered me most. The ease with which she had said it. The lack of remorse. I decided to change tactics. I stopped calling donation centers and started searching my own house. Mark and Karen had helped me organize several rooms. The attic, the basement, the garage. They had packed things into boxes, labeled them with Karen's neat, precise handwriting, and stacked them against the walls. They told me it was to make my life easier. Now, I realized it was a way for them to control what I kept and what I did not. I started in the attic. For 2 days, I pulled down box after box. Christmas decorations. Old photo albums Karen had deemed duplicates, Mark's childhood toys. My old army uniform. I opened every single one. My back ached and my hands were covered in dust, but I did not stop. There was no recipe box. Next, I tackled the basement. It was damper down there, and the boxes were mostly filled with old tools and canning jars. I felt a growing sense of despair. Maybe she had thrown it out after all. Maybe my quest was pointless. I was about to give up for the day when my eyes fell on a stack of boxes in the far corner, partially hidden behind an old furnace. These boxes were different. They were not labeled in Karen's handwriting. They were plain brown cardboard, sealed with a different kind of tape. My heart started to beat faster. I pulled the top one down. It was heavy. I sliced through the tape with my pocket knife and opened the flaps. Inside were Eleanor's gardening books, her favorite watering can, and a collection of seed packets. Things I had thought were long gone. Things Karen had told me she had taken care of. I pulled down the second box. It was filled with her knitting supplies. Yarn, needles, half-finished projects. A small sweater for a grandchild we had hoped for, but never had. A wave of grief washed over me, so powerful it almost knocked me off my feet. I sat down hard on the cold concrete floor, the sweater in my hands. Karen had not just donated these things. She had hidden them. She was systematically removing every trace of my wife from this house, piece by piece. She was curating my grief, deciding what I was allowed to remember and what I was not. My sadness quickly turned back to anger. I stood up and pulled down the third and final box. It was smaller and lighter than the others. I did not need to open it to know what was inside. I could feel it, the shape, the weight. My hands were trembling as I cut the tape. I lifted the flaps. And there it was, the dark cherry wood box, the carved heart on the lid, the slightly loose hinge. It was safe. It was here. I ran my fingers over the smooth wood, a feeling of profound relief washing over me. I lifted the lid. The familiar scent of old paper, vanilla, and cinnamon filled the air. The cards were all there, safe and sound. Eleanor's familiar handwriting, the splatters of cake batter, the smudges of chocolate. It was all here. I closed the lid and held the box to my chest. She had not donated it. She had hidden it from me, in my own house. She had lied to my face. The question was, why? Why go to all this trouble? Why not just throw it away if she wanted it gone? Hiding it meant she wanted it for something. The cold, sharp feeling returned, colder and sharper than ever before. This was not over. In fact, it had just begun. I carried the box upstairs, my mind already working, formulating a plan. She wanted to erase Eleanor. I would make sure she never forgot her. I did not confront her right away. My first instinct was to call Mark, to demand they come over, to throw the box on the table and watch the lie crumble on Karen's face. But I stopped myself. A public explosion would give her the chance to play the victim. She would twist it, claim she was only trying to help, that I was a confused old man lashing out in my grief. Mark, ever the peacekeeper, would try to smooth things over, and nothing would fundamentally change. No, this required a different approach. It required patience. It required a strategy. I had been a navigator in the service. I knew how to plot a course. I took the recipe box to my bedroom and hid it in the back of my closet, tucked away behind my old dress shoes. For now, it was my secret, my leverage. The next step was to understand her motive. Why lie? Why hide the box instead of simply getting rid of it? There had to be a reason. I decided to start by testing the waters, to see how she would react if I brought it up again. I needed to see how deep the deception went. The following Sunday, they came for their weekly visit. I made a pot of coffee, and we sat in the living room, the one I had rearranged back to its original, comfortable state. Karen eyed the armchair Eleanor had loved, the one she thought was gone, but she said nothing. The air was thick with unspoken tension. I decided to wade right in. You know, I began, stirring my coffee slowly. I've been thinking a lot about that recipe box. Karen's posture stiffened. Dad, we have been over this, she said, her voice tight. It is gone. You need to let it go. I know, I said, holding up a hand. But I was wondering, which Goodwill did you take it to? The one on Main Street or the one out by the highway? I was thinking I might go down there just on the off chance it is still on a shelf somewhere. You never know. I watched her face carefully. A flicker of something, maybe panic, crossed her eyes before she masked it. The one on Main Street, she said quickly. Too quickly. But it was weeks ago.
It will be long gone by now.
Someone probably bought it. Probably, I agreed, taking a sip of coffee. But it is worth a shot, do not you think? It meant a lot to me. I looked over at Mark. You were with her, right, son? Do you remember who you gave it to? Mark shifted uncomfortably. He looked at Karen, then at me. I was mostly carrying the heavy stuff, Dad, he said, his voice low. Karen handled the smaller boxes. I am not sure. He was a terrible liar. He could not even look me in the eye. Right, I said, letting the silence stretch out. Karen was staring at me, her eyes narrowed. She was trying to figure out what I was doing. It is a waste of your time, she finally said. You will not find it. Maybe not, I replied calmly. But I feel like I have to try. For Eleanor. I let the subject drop after that. But the first crack in her story had appeared. She had committed to a specific location. That was a mistake. A good liar keeps things vague. A bad liar provides details that can be checked. And I intended to check them. The next morning, I drove down to the Goodwill on Main Street. I knew the box would not be there, but that was not the point of my visit. I spoke to the manager, a kind woman named Sarah. I described the box and asked if she remembered seeing it. She shook her head. I am sorry, she said. We get so many donations, it is hard to keep track. But a handmade wooden box like that, I think I would remember. When did your daughter-in-law say she dropped it off? About 2 months ago, I said. Sarah frowned. We keep detailed logs of all non-clothing donations for our inventory. If you want, I can check the records for that time period. I would appreciate that very much, I said. She led me to a small office and pulled out a thick binder. She flipped through the pages. After a few minutes, she looked up. I am sorry, she said again. There is no record of a donation like that. We have logs for every furniture item, every piece of houseware, every box of books. There is nothing about a wooden recipe box. Are you sure? I asked, feigning disappointment.
Positive, she said.
Our system is very thorough. Is it possible she took it somewhere else? She was very specific, I said, shaking my head sadly. She said it was here. I thanked Sarah for her time and left the store. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time. The confirmation of her lie did not bring me any satisfaction. It just deepened the cold pit in my stomach. This was not a simple misunderstanding. This was a calculated, deliberate deception. She had gone to great lengths to convince me the box was gone forever. The question remained.
Why?
The need to know the answer was becoming an obsession. My next move was to talk to my granddaughter, Lucy. She is Mark and Karen's daughter, a sweet girl of 16. She adored her grandmother. Eleanor had taught her how to bake, and they had spent many happy afternoons in the kitchen together, their hands covered in flour. Lucy was often caught in the middle of the family tensions, and I did not want to put her in a difficult position. But she was my only other potential source of information. I had to be careful. I called her and asked if she wanted to come over for lunch on Saturday. Just the two of us. She agreed immediately. When she arrived, I had a plate of sandwiches ready. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she and Eleanor had decorated countless Christmas cookies. We talked for a while about school, about her friends, about her plans for the summer. I did not want to rush it. Finally, I found an opening. You know, I said casually, I was really hoping to make Grandma's snickerdoodles for you today, but I could not find her recipe. Lucy's face fell.
Oh.
I miss her snickerdoodles. Me too, I said. I asked your mom for the old recipe box, but she said she donated it. I watched Lucy's reaction. There was no surprise. Just a quiet sadness. I know, she said. Mom said we had to get rid of some of Grandma's old things. Did you see the box? I asked gently. When she was packing things up. Lucy thought for a moment. I think so. She had a bunch of stuff in the garage she was sorting through. There were a lot of boxes. She paused. Then her eyes lit up with a memory.
Wait.
I do remember it. Because Mom opened it. She was looking through the cards. My heart skipped a beat. What was she doing? She was taking pictures of them, Lucy said. With her phone. She said she wanted to digitize them, to save them on the computer, so we would not lose them. Digitize them. The word sounded so clinical, so cold. Eleanor's recipes were not data to be saved on a hard drive. They were tangible pieces of her. The smudges and stains were part of the story. That was thoughtful of her, I said, my voice carefully neutral. Did she say what she was going to do with the pictures? Oh yeah, Lucy said, her enthusiasm returning. It is a secret, so you cannot tell her I told you. She is starting a food blog. It is going to be called The Modern Family Kitchen. She is going to post all of Grandma's recipes, but with her own modern twist. She said it is a way to honor Grandma's memory and share her legacy with the world. The sandwich in my hand suddenly felt like a lead weight. I put it down on my plate. A food blog. Sharing her legacy.
No.
It was not about sharing. It was about stealing. It was about taking Eleanor's life's work and rebranding it as her own. The modern twist would be just enough to claim ownership. She had not hidden the box to get rid of it. She had hidden it so she could control it. So she could mine it for content, for her own self-aggrandizement. The full picture was finally clear. The lie about the donation was to stop me from asking for the box. The hidden boxes in my own basement were to ensure she had exclusive access. She was not just erasing Eleanor. She was trying to become her. A newer, better, more modern version. The audacity of it, the sheer, breathtaking arrogance, left me speechless. Grandpa? Lucy asked, her voice filled with concern. Are you okay? You look pale. I forced a smile. I am fine, sweetheart. Just an old man lost in thought. I looked at my granddaughter, at her innocent, trusting face. She had no idea of the game her mother was playing. "That sounds like a big project for your mom," I said. "It is," she beamed. "She has been testing the recipes for weeks. But she keeps saying they do not taste quite right. She says Grandma must have had a secret ingredient she did not write down." A secret ingredient. I almost laughed. Eleanor's secret ingredient was love. It was the patience she put into every measurement, the care she took with every fold of the dough. It was the joy she felt in feeding the people she cherished. That was something Karen would never be able to replicate, no matter how many pictures she took. A cold, hard resolve settled over me. I knew exactly what I had to do. My plan began to take shape, clear and precise in my mind. Karen wanted to put her own modern twist on Eleanor's recipes. I was going to give her a taste of the original. The next few weeks were a performance. I played the part of the grieving but accepting father-in-law. When Karen asked if I had ever gone down to the Goodwill, I sighed and told her she was right. It was a waste of time. I told her I had made my peace with it. I saw the relief in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought the last, most significant piece of Eleanor was now under her control. She grew bolder in her visits, suggesting new paint colors for the kitchen and talking about replacing the old linoleum floor. I just nodded and smiled, letting her think she was making progress. Inside, I was counting down the days. My plan was simple, but I knew it would be effective. It would not be a screaming match. It would be a quiet, public humiliation, delivered in the heart of my own home. I decided to host a family dinner. It was not unusual for me to do so, but I made this one sound special. I called Mark and told him I wanted to have them over to celebrate the beginning of summer. I told him I was going to try a new recipe I had found, something special. Karen's interest was immediately piqued. "Oh, what are you making?" she had asked, her voice audible in the background of the call. "It is a surprise," I said. "Just be here Saturday at 6. I spent the day of the dinner preparing. I went to the grocery store and bought the best ingredients. I was making Eleanor's famous pot roast, a dish so tender it fell apart with a fork. I made her creamy mashed potatoes and her green beans with toasted almonds. The house filled with the warm, familiar smells of our life together. It felt good to be cooking her food again, to be filling the silence with the comforting sounds of a kitchen at work. It felt like she was there with me, standing by my side. But the main event, the centerpiece of my plan, was dessert. For that, I needed the recipe box. I went to my closet and pulled it out from its hiding place. I opened the lid and felt a wave of emotion. I ran my fingers over the cards until I found the one I was looking for. Eleanor's famous chocolate chip cookies. The card was splattered with drops of batter, and the corners were soft with age. Her instructions were written in her looping, elegant cursive. I read through them, my heart aching with a familiar mix of love and loss. Then I set about my task. I followed the recipe almost perfectly. I creamed the butter and sugar. I beat in the eggs and vanilla. I mixed the dry ingredients. But I made one small, crucial adjustment. The recipe called for the cookies to be baked at 375 degrees for 10 to 12 minutes. I set the oven to 450 degrees, and I left them in for 25 minutes. I watched through the small window in the oven door as the edges turned from golden brown to dark brown, and then to black. The smell of burning sugar filled the kitchen, a harsh, acrid smell that was the complete opposite of everything Eleanor's cooking represented. When I pulled them out, they were hockey pucks. Charred, hard, and inedible. They were perfect. That evening, Mark, Karen, and Lucy arrived right on time. Karen walked in and sniffed the air. "Something smells burnt," she said, a small, condescending smile on her face. "Just a little kitchen mishap," I said cheerfully. "Dinner itself is fine, I promise." We sat down at the dining room table. I had used Eleanor's best china and her silver. I wanted the setting to be perfect, a stark contrast to the ugliness that was to come. The pot roast was a success. Even Karen had to admit it was delicious. "This is wonderful, Dad," Mark said, helping himself to more potatoes. "It really is," Karen added. Where did you get the recipe? Oh, it is an old family recipe, I said, looking directly at her. I am sure you know how that is. She gave me a tight, forced smile and said nothing. We finished the main course, and I cleared the plates. The atmosphere was pleasant, almost normal. Lucy was telling a funny story about her chemistry class. Mark was laughing. Karen was looking smug, as if she were the hostess of this successful little party. It was time. I hope everyone saved room for dessert, I announced from the kitchen. Always, Lucy cheered. I placed the plate of burnt cookies in the center of the table. They sat there in a sad, blackened pile. The silence was immediate. Lucy stared at them, confused. Mark looked uncomfortable. Karen's face was a perfect picture of disdain. Well, she said, breaking the silence. What on earth are these supposed to be? Her tone was laced with pity, as if I were a senile old man who could not be trusted with an oven. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The curtain was about to rise on my little play. They're supposed to be Eleanor's chocolate chip cookies, I said, my voice calm and even. I sat back down at the table. I was trying to make them from memory, but I could not seem to get it right. It is a shame I do not have her recipe box anymore. I am sure the instructions were in there. Karen shifted in her chair. Dad, really, it is fine. It is just a cookie. It is probably for the best that you are not messing around in the kitchen too much anyway. You could have a fall. Oh, I am more resilient than I look, I said, my eyes locked on hers. But it has been bothering me, the whole thing with the box. I just cannot seem to let it go. So, I did something you advised against. I went to the Goodwill on Main Street. Her smile faltered.
And?
Did you find it? She asked a little too sharply. No, I did not, I said. In fact, they had no record of it at all. I spoke to the manager, Sarah. A lovely woman. She checked their entire donation log for the past 6 months. A handmade, dark cherrywood box like that? They never received it. Isn't that strange? The color was draining from Karen's face. Mark was looking back and forth between us, a dawning horror on his face. Dad, he started. What is this about? It is about the truth, Mark, I said, my voice growing harder. It is about honesty. Your wife told me she donated the box, but the donation center has no record of it. It is quite a mystery. It must have been a different location, Karen stammered, her composure finally breaking. I get them confused. Oh, but you were so certain, I pressed on. You said Main Street. You were very clear. But do not worry, I am not upset about that. I am a forgiving man. What I find harder to forgive is being lied to. I turn my attention to my granddaughter. Lucy, sweetheart, I said, my voice softening. You mentioned your mother was starting a food blog. To honor your grandmother's legacy. That is such a wonderful idea. I am so proud of you for wanting to carry on her traditions. Lucy looked confused, but she nodded. Mom is doing all the work, she said quietly. Yes, I am sure she is, I said. I am sure she has been working very hard, trying to get those recipes just right. She must be a very dedicated student of your grandmother's cooking. It must be difficult, though, trying to recreate them without the original notes. You mentioned she was having trouble getting them to taste the same. Karen stood up abruptly. Her chair scraped against the wooden floor. I think we should go, she said, her voice trembling with rage. You are not well. You are confused, and you are making things up. Am I? I asked. I stood up as well. I walked over to the sideboard that stood against the dining room wall. I opened the top drawer. I reached inside and pulled out the dark cherrywood box. I walked back to the table and placed it down with a soft, definitive thud. It sat right next to the plate of burnt cookies. The silence in the room was absolute. Mark stared at the box, as if it were a ghost. Lucy's eyes were wide with shock. Karen looked like she had been struck. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. I found it, I said, my voice low and clear. It was in a box in the basement, hidden behind the furnace. Right where you put it. You did not donate it, Karen. You stole it. You stole it so you could copy the recipes and pass them off as your own on some ridiculous blog. You wanted to steal my wife's legacy. I picked up one of the burnt cookies from the plate. I held it up between my thumb and forefinger. You see this? I said, looking directly into her eyes. This is what you get when you try to replicate something without understanding the heart of it. You get a burnt, empty shell. You can copy the words on a card, Karen. But you cannot copy a lifetime of love. You cannot steal a memory. I let the cookie drop back onto the plate with a clatter. My wife's recipes are not for you. Her legacy is not for you to tarnish. You wanted to erase her from this house. But you failed. She is in the walls. She is in the air. And she is in this box. And this box is staying right here, with me. I looked at my son. His face was pale, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and anger. He was finally seeing his wife for who she truly was. Mark, I said. I think it is time for you and Karen to leave. Karen finally found her voice. It was a shrill, ugly sound. How dare you, she hissed. After everything I have done for you. I was trying to help you. No, I said, my voice like ice. You were trying to help yourself. There is a difference. Mark stood up. He did not look at me. He looked at his wife. For the first time, there was no deference in his eyes. There was only a profound disappointment. Let's go, Karen, he said, his voice flat. He grabbed her arm, not gently, and pulled her toward the door. She tried to argue, to spit more venom at me, but he just kept pulling her along. Lucy stood frozen by the table, tears streaming down her face. Grandpa, I did not know, she whispered. I went to her and wrapped my arms around her. I know you did not, sweetheart, I said, holding her tight. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. We stood there for a long time, listening to the sound of a car door slamming and an engine roaring to life, then fading into the distance. The silence that followed was different from the one I had been living with for the past 8 months. It was not a lonely silence. It was a peaceful one. The battle was over. And Eleanor had won. The aftermath of that dinner was quiet and decisive. I did not hear from Mark for 3 days. I knew he needed time to process what had happened, to reconcile the woman he married with the person who had been revealed at my dining room table. I did not push him. I spent those days in a state of calm. I went through Eleanor's recipe box, card by card. I read her notes. I remembered the meals, and I felt closer to her than I had in a long time. The house no longer felt empty. It felt protected. When Mark finally called, his voice was heavy. Dad, he said, I am so sorry. There is nothing for you to be sorry for, son. I told him. You did not do this. I let it happen, he said, his voice cracking. I saw how she was, how she treated you, how she talked about Mom's things. I did not want to fight. I thought I was keeping the peace. But I was just letting her walk all over everyone. I am so ashamed. We all make mistakes, Mark, I said. The important thing is what we do after we realize we have made them. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. We had a long talk, he said finally. Karen and I. She does not see it. She still thinks she was in the right. She thinks you were cruel to her, that you set her up. I sighed. I was not surprised. And what do you think? I asked. I think you were right, he said, his voice firm. About everything. What she did was wrong. It was deceitful, and it was cruel. It was not just about a box, was it? No, I said. It was never just about the box. I told her she needs to apologize to you, he continued. A real, sincere apology. And until she can do that, I will be visiting you alone. I was taken aback. I had expected him to ask me to forgive her, to smooth things over for the sake of the family. This was a side of my son I had not seen in a very long time. It was the side that was not afraid to stand up for what was right. That is your decision, Mark, I said quietly. It is, he said. It is the right one. I love my wife, Dad. But I love you too. And I have to respect my mother's memory. I let Karen disrespect it, and I will not do that anymore. We talked for a little longer. He asked about Lucy, and I told him she was struggling but that we would get through it. We made a plan for him to come over the following weekend, just the two of us, to watch a baseball game like we used to. When we hung up, I felt a sense of relief, so profound it was almost dizzying. I had not lost my son. In fact, I felt like I had finally gotten him back. My next conversation was with Lucy. I invited her over again, this time for the express purpose of baking. I wanted to replace the ugly memory of the burnt cookies with a good one. When she arrived, she was quiet and withdrawn. I could see the conflict in her eyes. She loved her mother, but she knew what her mother had done was wrong. I did not mention the dinner. Instead, I just took out the recipe box and placed it on the kitchen table. I was thinking, I said gently, we should make Grandma's snickerdoodles. The right way this time. A small smile touched her lips. I would like that, she whispered. We spent the afternoon in the kitchen. I showed her how to read Eleanor's cursive. I told her stories about the different recipes, where they came from, the occasions they were made for. I explained that this secret ingredient was not a thing you could measure in a spoon. It was the feeling you put into the food. As we worked, I could see the tension leaving her shoulders. She started to ask questions, to laugh at my stories. We were not just baking cookies. We were rebuilding a bridge. When the cookies came out of the oven, they were perfect. Golden brown, soft and chewy, and covered in a crackly layer of cinnamon sugar. The house filled with that warm, comforting smell. We sat at the table, eating the warm cookies and drinking glasses of cold milk. Grandpa, Lucy said after a while, her voice small. Is Mom a bad person? I thought about my answer carefully. No, sweetheart, I said. I do not think your mom is a bad person. I think she is a person who got lost. She started caring more about how things look than how they feel. She wanted to have a legacy like your grandmother's, but she did not understand that you have to build it. You cannot just take it from someone else. She is really angry, Lucy said.
She will not talk to me about it.
She just says you were mean to her. I know, I said. And I am sorry you are in the middle of this. But sometimes, when people do something wrong, the only way to make them see it is to hold up a mirror. The dinner was my mirror. I did not enjoy it, Lucy. But it was necessary. She nodded, understanding more than I gave her credit for. Can I take some of these home? She asked, gesturing to the cookies. Of course, I said. But they're for you and your dad. Not for your mother's blog. A flicker of a grin crossed her face.
Deal, she said.
The new normal settled in. Mark came over every weekend. We worked in the yard together. We watched sports. We talked. It was easy, comfortable. He told me that things at home were tense. Karen refused to apologize. She was sleeping in the guest room. He did not know what the future held for them, but he was no longer willing to compromise his own values to keep a false peace. I was proud of him. One Saturday, about a month after the dinner, Mark and I were sitting on the back porch. He handed me a magazine. You should see this, he said. I opened it to the page he had marked. It was an article about local food bloggers. And there's a picture of a smiling woman next to a plate of perfectly styled, but somehow sterile-looking, cookies. The headline read, The Modern Family Kitchen, Karen Miller Reinvents Family Classics. I read the first paragraph. It talked about how she was rescuing her husband's family recipes from a bygone era, making them fresh and relevant for a new generation. I looked at the picture of Karen, at her triumphant, smug smile. She had launched the blog anyway. She had used the pictures she had taken on her phone. She had found a way to spin the story, to paint herself as a culinary hero. A part of me should have been angry, but I was not. I just felt a quiet pity for her. She will never get it, I said, closing the magazine and handing it back to Mark. No, he said, his voice heavy with resignation. She will not. I looked out at the garden, at the roses Eleanor had planted. They were in full bloom. I thought about the recipe box sitting safely in my kitchen. I thought about the afternoon I had spent with Lucy, our hands covered in flour. I thought about the perfect, warm snickerdoodles we had made. Karen could have her blog. She could have her pictures and her modern twists. She could tell whatever story she wanted to the world. But I had the real thing. I had the memories. I had the legacy. The house filled with the smell of cinnamon and love, a scent Karen could never replicate. Some things cannot be stolen, only cherished. And she had learned the difference, even if she would never admit it. She had the imitation, a burnt and hollow copy. I had the original, and that was a victory sweeter than any cookie. I had protected Eleanor's memory, and in doing so, I had found my own way to move forward. Not by erasing the past, but by holding it close. I knew Eleanor would be proud, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace.